Hello and welcome to this video interview, which is part of the series ECMI Conversations with Experts. In each episode, we interview a prominent expert in the field of minority studies to discuss a specific topic with one of the ECMI researchers. My name is Ruth Kircher. I'm Principal Researcher at the ECMI, and I'm delighted that today I get to talk to Mirjam Vellinga from Afûk, the General Frisian Education Commission, about the topic of minority language promotion. Welcome, Mirjam.
Thank you, Ruth. Glad to be here.
So Mirjam Vellinga is head of the Language Promotion Division at Afûk, which is an institution that was previously known as the Algemene Friese Onderrigcommissie, so the General Frisian Education Commission. Afûk is an organization that promotes Frisian language and culture in the province of Fryslân, in the north of the Netherlands, which is home to most members of the West Frisian minority. In her role as head of the Language Promotion Division at Afûk, Mirjam advises political institutions as well as public service institutions with regards to language policy. She's involved in projects relating to the use of West Frisian in the private sector and increasingly also in healthcare. And she's the initiator of Fryslân's extremely innovative and also highly successful language promotion campaign, Praat maar Fries, which means Let's Speak Frisian. A few years ago, when the capital of Fryslân, Leeuwarden, was the European Capital of Culture, Mirjam was the person who created and ran a language pavilion to promote minority language awareness and minority language use. In addition to all of this, Mirjam is also the manager of Afûk's international projects, and she's a steering committee member and currently also vice president of the European Language Equality Network. I met Mirjam a few years ago when, before joining the ECMI, I was based at the Friese Academy in Fryslân, and we decided to work together on a project about new speakers of West Frisian, which we concluded with a minority language promotion campaign that was based on our research findings. So I have first-hand experience of seeing Mirjam's fascinating and highly creative approach to the task of minority language promotion, and I'm truly delighted that she is, at least virtually, here with us today. So thank you again for joining us, Mirjam.
You're welcome.
So the job title on your business card is language promoter, and that's definitely not something that we see every day. Can you say a bit more about what this job actually entails? So what does the everyday life of a language promoter look like?
Well, it's quite a busy life. And what I basically do is I design strategies to promote the Frisian language and to make sure that the Frisian language is used in a lot of places. So I design strategies aimed at healthcare, for instance, or aimed at governments or the private sector, depending on which kind of project we are working on. And to give you an idea of my agenda, I've looked at it for the last couple of days, and because I do also some other stuff, international stuff, but when it comes to this language promotion thing in Fryslân, I had a meeting with some colleagues and some people from funeral associations to see if we can increase the use of Frisian when it comes to funeral services, advertisement in newspapers, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a bit of a niche, but it is, of course, an aspect of everyday life. And we noticed there are quite a lot of Frisian language advertisements in the newspaper, funeral advertisements, but also with quite a lot of mistakes in Frisian, which of course is a shame. So we thought, okay, what can we do about that? Then I also worked with some other colleagues on a campaign aimed at grandparents and making them more aware of the role they can play in the transmission of the language to the grandchildren. Mm-hmm. So it's going to start in January, and there's going to be billboards and activities for grandparents to do with their grandchildren, all in Frisian, for instance. So that's the thing we've been working on. Another thing I do is I read quite a lot of articles and books about language policy, mm-hmm. But also, for instance, about how they do use the Welsh language in Welsh healthcare to mm-hmm. see if I can learn from that and implement something of that in the Frisian situation. And we're also working on a magazine for healthcare, mental health care workers, for instance, informing them about the role of language in their work and what Frisian language could do to improve their relationship with their clients, for instance. So quite a broad range of activities, and also quite a set of skills that you need. You need to be strategic, you need to be creative, you have to have some marketing skills, and so it's a mix of all kinds of different skills you have to use and also have to be interested in.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's literally everything from everyday aspects of life, from infancy through adulthood, including everyday aspects of death and accompanying the dying.
Yeah.
So it's
everywhere there is people, there is language. So
absolutely, yeah. And so the aim of what you do is to increase language learning, language use, language awareness. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's aimed at language learning, maybe to some extent, to some degree, but it's more about language awareness, language use, language confidence and assertiveness, and also the other side is try to make organizations and public institutions aware of the role of the minority language and advise them in how to use the Frisian language, for instance. And sometimes they want to do stuff, but they really don't know how, and then we advise them what they could do to make the language more visible and make sure that's where the language learning aspects also comes around. Make sure that employees have enough skills in the Frisian language. So that's another aspect of my job.
So very multifaceted. One of the things that I can imagine our audience might be curious about is how you got into this line of work. Did you always know that you wanted to work with minority languages? And did you always know that being a language promoter is an option, or is this something you found out about later on?
Yeah, both I found out later on. Although working with languages was always something I wanted to do. So when I graduated from high school, I went to Groningen to study. I started with English, and my goal was to become a translator, interpreter, and go to Brussels and work for the EU. That was my first plan, or work for a publishing house, because I also like to read and already worked in a bookshop. So, but then I studied English for, I think, 2 years, and I got a little bit bored. And the only thing that struck my interest was Old English. And through Old English, I, of course, also ran into Old Frisian because they are very much linked. And then I heard that you could also study Frisian at the University of Groningen, which I didn't know. Which is
You're a mother tongue Frisian speaker, right?
Yes.
So our audience should probably know. Yeah.
So I more or less quite impulsively decided to start studying Frisian, which was, I thought, the good decision, because it was much more interesting, and it also had subjects like linguistic politics, socio-linguistics, all that kind of stuff, which makes studying a language much more interesting than just have the grammar and literature, and for me at least. So, and then I did some psychology as well, and some cultural and arts studies along the side as well. So that was more or less my package when I left the university. My parents were a bit worried that having graduated and having studied Frisian language, I couldn't get a job. But since I was the only one in, I don't know, a couple of years, I got quite a lot of phone calls people wanted to talk to me. So it was a good career choice in that respect as well. And that's how I ended up at Afûk. And my first project was to see if we could use more Frisian language in Frisian museums.
Okay.
So that was my first thing that I did. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah,
and
still a very important topic.
Yeah. So, but I didn't know of the existence of the job language promoter or something like that. And I think I more or less created the function for myself at Afûk. Because Afûk was mainly an educational organization. I think after a while, when I got in touch with other minority language organizations in Europe, I thought, oh, okay, there are some other people who are more or less doing the things that I'm doing as well. So I have colleagues, yay.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, yeah. And they weren't called language promoters as such, I think, because in a lot of other minority language regions, they already, the bigger ones at least, are already quite specialized. So they have an officer for Welsh in the public sector, for instance, or they have someone, an officer for the Welsh in healthcare, and I more or less do everything. At once. So, yeah.
But that means that there are language promoters, even if they don't have that specific job title, in other contexts as well.
Yeah.
So you've just mentioned people who work towards the maintenance and revitalization of Welsh and Wales. Can you give some other examples where this kind of work is part of official institutions and is ongoing?
For instance, in Ireland for Irish, also for the Basque language in the Basque country, Catalan, Catalonia, and the other countries and regions where Catalan is spoken. And then there are some smaller languages who are more or less also organized or have an organization to promote the language. Most of the things they are doing in education. For instance, in the north of Italy with Fryslân, or let me think, Scots Gaelic in Scotland. So yeah, there are some. It's the more money there is, and the more autonomy a region has. The more resources there are, and the more people are working in the language and in the field. Yeah.
And following up on this, would you say that there is a difference, or do you see a difference in minority communities that have language promoters and those who don't, in terms of, for example, the general population's language awareness or language vitality or public engagement with minority language issues?
Yeah, I think there is a big difference. It's a bit hard to say if it's just because of language promoters, because language promoters means there is money to have people to do so. So, and usually there is a bigger infrastructure around the language as well. And that's also a bit of the tragic story of smaller minority languages, that the communities are quite small. They don't have any resources. Speakers feel usually a bit left alone, and sometimes even either frustrated or they have given up. They use the language in some contexts, but they have given up to use it in other contexts, or sometimes they are not even proud of their own language because of language politics strategies from the main government, for instance. So, there is a difference, but and it would be good for the smaller language communities as well to have language promoters working in their region and with their language, because I think when you raise awareness and give people more confidence, then there will be a lot of regions will be building on infrastructure, for instance, for a language, and things will happen.
So it sounds like having a language promoter is part of a larger investment that needs to be made into the protection and promotion of minority languages, where the infrastructures need to be built, but the infrastructures alone aren't enough. It's not enough to just throw money at a minority community, but there also needs to be support in the protection and promotion of the language of that community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And talking about support and protection and promotion, earlier I mentioned this very successful language promotion campaign that you instigated and developed called Praat maar Frysk, Let's Speak Frisian. So this is something that you started quite a while ago. I read it was in 2007, so 16 years ago. And it would be great if you could tell us a bit more about this. I think most people don't even know what we mean when we talk about a language promotion campaign. So that would be a great point to start, if you could say a bit about what that means, a language promotion campaign. And then for this one also, if you could tell us a bit about the goals and whether the campaign's been the same since 2007 or whether and how it's evolved over the years.
Yeah, like you said, I've started it in 2007 because I felt that especially Frisian speakers needed some support to help them using the language, but also let other people know that they were a Frisian speaker, for instance, or that Frisian could be spoken in some kind of situation or environment. So the first thing that we did was first thing of the campaign was design like small pins, buttons, and stickers people could use. You can see them with other minority languages as well, as a sign that you can use the language there, because a lot of minority language speakers are insecure about when and where they can use their language safely. So that was the first thing. And 2007 was also a year when social media more or less became bigger and more used. So I decided that we really should also use social media as part of the campaign. We didn't have Facebook in the Netherlands then. There was a small group of people who used it, but it wasn't very popular. So we had our own kind of Facebook thing. But anyway, so we decided to campaign through social media, which was very successful. It was the time when social media was fun, which it isn't anymore. But at that time, it was fun. So that made the campaign bigger and bigger and grew very fast. So we did not only the stickers and the buttons, but we also worked with different municipalities and have different activities to promote the language, but also be visible at different festivals, for instance. We had I don't know how you call it in English, but you have those kind of help poles at the side of the road when your car breaks down, and you can you had them before mobile phones were there. And we bought an old one, and you could record small movies with them. You could leave messages in that in that road phone, I can call it. But the only thing they had to do was speak Frisian, and they can leave a message about whatever they liked. And we put that on YouTube, and that became popular. And then bands approached me, musical bands, and they wanted to do songs for the campaign. We had quite a lot of famous people who became ambassadors. So that's, well, it kind of more or less got a little bit out of hand, because I wanted to do a pilot, but it was all over the place. What really was important was that we were on social media, and that we could show that Frisian is a language that you also can use on social media. And a lot of people became aware of the fact that although they could speak the Frisian language, they couldn't write the Frisian language, because they never learned it at school, because there was no education in Frisian language.
Yeah.
And they really wanted to, because social media is it's how you communicate with friends. It's not writing a formal letter or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt strange for a lot of people to speak Frisian to a friend, but write Dutch on social media. So that increased also the use of written Frisian.
Mm-hmm.
And also more people who wanted to learn to write the Frisian language as well.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of things came from that campaign. And at first it was more or less a general language promotion campaign to support people to use the Frisian language. And it evolved in quite a lot of different other campaigns, the latest being the New Speaker campaign. Praat maar Fries, ek mooi naar je Fries praters. Speak Frisian also with new speakers. But we also aimed at the public domain companies with different kind of materials and goodies and freebies, but also with advice. And now we have a team. It's not just me, but a team of people. And someone who does, you could call it an account manager, maybe. She goes to different companies and organizations, has conversations about how to use the Frisian language. We help them out with translation, visibility of Frisian in their company, changing their name, for instance, into a Frisian name. Making Frisian visible in the shops, on their website, or their internal and external communication. So there's a whole range of things that we discuss with them. And the provincial government has some funding for companies to help them make the language more visible. And so they can make use of that funding as well. And we help them with getting that funding. So it has evolved quite a bit, and it's grown up now. and the use of social media is not that important. I mean, it's part of our way to communicate, but it's not that important anymore. And I notice a kind of a trend to go back to old school communication and actually go to people, speak to people. And use more old school kind of materials like leaflets to inform people.
Yeah. So you've kind of already answered my next question, which was going to be, to what extent being a language promoter entails working with others? So you've already mentioned educators, organizations, politicians and other stakeholders. So it's not just you sitting in an office saying, I'm going to promote the Frisian language now, but it's an interactive thing.
Because I couldn't do it alone. I wouldn't want to do it alone. So you need other organizations and other people, and you need to create kind of a support base in every organization. So when we go to a bigger organization, for instance, we also advise them to have some sort of group of people who are enthusiastic about using the Frisian language, so they can put it on the agendas within that company when it comes to communication, for instance, or visibility. But I also work quite a lot with the provincial government, talking about language policy and long-term strategy and that kind of stuff. Also, of course, with my colleagues abroad from other minority language organizations, with the local media, with a local theater company, with cultural companies, hospitals, healthcare
so really broad
workers.
Range of stakeholders.
Yeah. So quite a lot. Yeah.
So on the one hand, you get to advise policymakers and stakeholders regarding language policy and planning measures to promote the minority language. But on the other hand, you yourself get to actively promote the minority language, the awareness of it, learning, use amongst the general population. So that puts you in quite a unique position. And I'm curious, what's your take on the right balance between top-down and bottom-up measures for the promotion of minority languages like West Frisian?
Yeah, I think we need, of course, we need both. The top-down kind of measures make sure that there is kind of a foundation to build on, and make sure that there are some people have some basic rights, for instance, to use the language. And there are dictionaries and all that kind of stuff, and spelling rules and the things you need to use a language is very important. But the bottom up, of course, language is a community thing, especially when it comes to minority languages. And it's up to the users to maintain the language, but they can't do it alone. So I think Afûk and me, we have kind of a special position right in the middle. So all the measures coming up from provincial governments and European Union, and what kind of all kinds of measures. I wanted to say the regionale handvest of minority languages.
Oh, the European Charter of Regional Minority Languages?
Yeah, Charter, sorry. Yeah. I didn't know the word. European Charter of Minority Languages. I do know the word, but it didn't come.
Yeah.
So all this kind of stuff is very important. But it needs translating into how you can use it as just a normal speaker. And it needs translating into kind of practical measures and projects. And on the other hand, you have the people who want to do more with language, but sometimes don't know how or what kind of resources there are, or they need some funding, or they just need help to make their ideas into kind of a project, or using the language. And we are right in the middle, so we can help both sides and also connect both sides to make sure that there is an effective way of combining the bottom-up measures and the top-down measures and the bottom-up measures.
So my next question ties in with what you were saying about the minority language speakers and how they need to see the point of all of this. So the other day when we were chatting, we were saying that ideally language promotion work should enable and encourage minority language speakers to take charge of their own situation so that they themselves can play an active role in the maintenance and revitalization of their minority languages. So as a language promoter, what would you say is the biggest challenge to achieving this goal?
Well, I think it's making more people aware. I think that's the biggest challenge, and also making people more confident and aware that they can play an active role in maintaining the language. Sometimes there is some kind of way of thinking that I just speak it, but I don't have any role to play, and it's up to the government or Afûk or whatever organization or the schools to make sure that the language will be promoted or will be used. And that's very it takes a lot of time and effort, of course, to reach all those people and make sure that they know that they have a role to play themselves as well. Since a couple of years, I think 2020, we do workshops about linguistic assertiveness, and people can join for free. And the aim of those workshops is to make sure that people are aware of their own language attitudes, but also their assumptions. And those assumptions also entail where you can use the language, for instance. And if you can't use the language in the city of Leeuwarden because they don't speak Frisian there, some sort of, I know it's not true, but some people think that it is true. It's you can't use the language when you speak to your doctor or teacher or whatever. So when we have those conversations, then people realize, oh, but I can play a role in using my language, and I can use it more. And we give them the tools to build up confidence and do so. But we have to work with small groups, and we have to give a lot of those workshops for people to be more aware. So I think that's one of the main challenges. And of course, there are, a minority language is not. It comes from somewhere that it is a minority language and a minoritized language. So there's a lot of aspects around that as well. People are insecure, sometimes ashamed to use the language. And there are also people who tell them that they should be ashamed to use the language. So there's quite a lot of things going on psychologically as well. And also in the norm that is used around languages. I mean, Dutch is the main language. Dutch is the most important language in the Netherlands. So Dutch has to come first. English is becoming increasingly more important as well. So what do we need the Frisian language for? That's also a question you have to answer every time, all the time, in every message that you're sending. So
So this is where throwing money at the problem would be helpful, so that there are more people who lead these kinds of language assertiveness workshops, more people who do the kind of work that you do, who are all pulling on the same string and making this happen.
And also, what I really like to do is one of my next kind of schemes is to work with one village and to see what happens when you work with a local community and the companies and all kinds of services that are in that village, and speak about language use and Frisian language and what you can do to increase the use of the Frisian language and the visibility, and see what happens then. And I'm very excited about that new project, which comes from the new speakers research as well, because we learned that people who want to learn the language really want to use it at a very local kind of environment.
It's a community.
Local level. And in order to do so, you also have to convince your neighbor to use the language as well. And you have to have the opportunity to use the language in your when you go at the local cafe or at the sports club or whatever. So so it means kind of a different take on using the language from both sides, the Frisian language speakers and the new speakers.
Let me ask one final question. The West Frisian context is complex and fascinating, and you've done so much over the last decades, and I think we can see the success of the kind of work that you do. What I'm wondering is whether the approach that you take to minority language promotion is so specific to the context of Fryslân that it can't be applied to anywhere else, or whether you think that there are lessons that other minority communities, like, for example, the North Frisians in Germany, can learn from the work that you've been doing.
Yes and no. It's not you can't copy what I've done in West Fryslân to North Fryslân. That's one-on-one. That's not possible. It's the same. I can't do what they do in the Basque Country over here because the situation is different. The culture is different, even though North Fryslân and West Frisian are more quite similar when it comes to maybe to culture, but even then. But I do know that we all use the same tools to promote the language. But sometimes in one situation you need a bigger hammer than I've used, or you need a different kind of screwdriver, or so but you still need a hammer and a screwdriver. So you have to you can use the same tools, but you have to think about, okay, if I want to do like the assertiveness kind of workshops, what components would be very important for us? What kind of aims do I want to do I have, and do I want to increase people speaking the language more outside of their homes, for instance? So you could aim to do that with that workshop, but you have to tweak it. And then there are also the language promotion campaigns. You could happily do kind of pins and stickers and all that kind of. That's easy to copy. So there are some things that are quite easy to use and to learn. To learn from, and other things need a little bit more preparation. And some things probably will not work because the community is so different, or too small, or different age groups working with the language. So, but yes, absolutely, we can learn from each other, because I've learned from the Welsh and the Basque people. And sometimes you really need very small things to get your mind going. Think, oh, well, it wouldn't work that way in Fryslân, but I can use that element of the campaign
in a different way.
In a different way, yeah.
So to me, that highlights the need to communicate between minority language communities.
Absolutely, yeah.
And to see what others are doing, and also the need to do language promotion in a research-informed way, because it has to be based on what the specific community that you are working on wants and needs, and what the status quo is in that community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we didn't talk a lot about research-based kind of stuff, but I read a lot of articles, mainly from other minority language regions, because there isn't a lot of research going on in Fryslân. So I was very happy to do the new speakers research with you, because the best way to do it is to have actually data from your own region to work with, because it's the most reliable, and you can actually directly work from that. The next best thing is to read stuff from other minority language regions and see if you can change some stuff and use it for your own region. But I also read quite a lot about psychology, about behavioral change, for instance, about cultural anthropology, about assertiveness, about marketing. So it's not only the linguistic part that you need, but you need quite a lot of other stuff as well.
It's a multidisciplinary endeavor.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I think we could keep talking about this for ages, so I'm going to say to be continued. So for now, many thanks, Mirjam, for sharing your vast knowledge about language promotion with us. Thanks also to everyone who's watched this interview. If you are interested in finding out more about Afûk, the organization where Mirjam works, you can visit their website at Afûk, afuk.frl. If you want to find out more about the Praat maar Fries campaign, you can do so by going to Praat maar Fries, which is praatmarfrysk.nl. And if you're interested in finding out more about Mirjam's and my joint work on New Speakers of West Frisian, you can do so by going to mercator.research.eu/en/new speakers. And that's where you can also find the links to all our joint publications and our other research outputs as well. And of course, for more interesting information about what the ECMI does, please follow us on social media, and you can visit our website at ecmi.de. So stay tuned for our next episode, and until then, goodbye.